Racist! Fascist! Racist! Fascist!
Greetings, ladies, gentlemen, and the rest of you. As you can see, I'm in my RV again. This is Jolly Scholar 888. Welcome to my Useless Eaters number 5, Throwing the Feminists Under the Bus, a prelude to Useless Eaters number 6, Immigration and the New Useless Eaters, or the New Eugenics Project. What exactly is the New Eugenics Project? The question is, who are the new useless eaters? But I'm getting ahead of myself. So why do I keep linking feminism with eugenics? What is really the connection? The point I'm trying to drive through is that feminism, ever since the late 60s, has not been about improving the lives of women. The abortion hysteria that was sold to Western women was the first indication of that fact. I hope I made a good case for that position over the last 3 discussions in this series. Now we are approaching the subject of weaponized immigration as being itself a eugenics project. We have to ask, what kind of eugenics? What kind of eugenics project is being carried out? But I'm getting ahead of myself. So let's take a look at what has been going on in Sweden, especially in regards to the status of women in relation to immigration. How have women been faring in wonderful Sweden? The first feminist government and the world's first humanitarian superpower. You like this picture, don't you? Walk of Shame, Sweden's first feminist government, don hijabs in Iran. It's very indicative. At any rate, we're going to start out with the case of a Somali woman who wanted to be a journalist in liberal feminist Sweden. Unfortunately, I think you're going to find this story a bit disheartening, but also very, very illuminating. So we're going to watch this video in its entirety, and it's very short, and I'll be commenting on it. The lady's name is Amun. She's a Somali immigrant to Sweden about 10 years ago. Actually, a bit more than that. But her story is very illuminating, and as I said, it's a bit disheartening. So, oh, by the way, you must pay close attention to the, sorry about that, close attention to the closed captions because it is all in Swedish. However, the captions are very large and they're very obvious, so you shouldn't have any trouble.
Amun är journalist och det första man märker är att hon brinner för journalistik mer än de flesta.
Om jag tycker hela världen är girkas, det är en person. Det är journalisterna i huvudet och allt annat jobb, allt girkarna i andra delen i kroppen.
Nu när jag hör dig prata så här varmt om journalistik så antar jag att du vill jobba som journalist i Sverige.
Aldrig. Nej, jag vill inte göra.
Amun kom som flykting 1991, först till Umeå som hon tycker är en av världens vackraste städer och sedan till Rinkeby i Stockholm. Amun hade gjort hela resan från flykting till att bli reporter på Sveriges Radio. Och hennes kunskaper och kontakter som somalier.
Okay, so as you can see, this young lady came to Sweden with stars in her eyes. She's going to the West. She wants to be a journalist and she wants to seek the truth. And she expects, at least she thought, that in Sweden, women were free and Sweden was a liberal feminist country in which she could fulfill her dreams of being a journalist, a female journalist. Well, you'll see what happens.
Somalier ledde henne snart in i en historia som skulle förändra hennes liv. En morgon fick Amun syn på en ung somalier i Rinkeby som hon kände igen sedan tidigare men som hade förändrats och börjat klä sig mer religiöst. Det blev starten på en granskning där hon avslöjade att en ledare på en ideell fritidsgård lockade ungdomar till Al-Shabaab.
Now, again, this video is really not about Islam at all. It's about feminism and its betrayal here in the West, of which Islam has been used as a tool. For those of you who don't know what Al-Shabaab is, that is well, we call them a terrorist, okay? I'm kind of done with that word. They are jihadists from Somalia, and part of their MO is, of course, fighting the West. Most of them were, a lot of the pirates there along the Somalian coast were from Al-Shabaab. At any rate, it's a whole, if you want to look up Al-Shabaab, you can. But they're obviously, recruiting in the mosque, in the temples. But that doesn't mean that the temples are being corrupted. That's not true. It's the mosque. They're not being corrupted. They're teaching Islam. And my point here is that you'll see this over and over, that somebody will suddenly start becoming more religious in the case of Islam. And the more religious they become, they start to become more of what we call maniacs. Again, I'm not here to judge Islam. Islam is fine in Islamic countries. But you can see how that's the only religion in the world in which, by studying it, by becoming more religious, and that's a quote I've heard so many times, oh, he's become more religious. And it's a prelude to the guy then going to blow himself up or shooting off a bunch of people. Yeah, I'm not here to criticize Islam, but this is a characteristic. And the key point to remember is the authorities throughout the West, they know this.
Klockan är 5:30 här i Ekot. Flera av de unga män som rekryterats från Sverige av den islamistiska rebellgruppen Al-Shabaab till strider i Somalia har värvats från en fritidsgård i Rinkeby i nordvästra Stockholm.
Efter reportagen fick Amun flera hot. Hon berättar att en kväll sattes hennes bil i brand nere på gatan. Hot och utfrysning var Amun ändå förberedd på. Men det var hon inte på det som hände sen. För några månader senare kom kritik från ett helt annat håll. Från kollegor till Amun på ett av Sveriges radios tyngsta samhällsprogram, P1s Konflikt. Ekots och därmed Amuns uppgifter beskrivs som hörsägen och rykten. Huvudreporter är Randi Mossige Norheim. Hon har fått Stora journalistpriset, Röda Korsets journalistpris och en rad andra utmärkelser.
Det är lite ganska...
Now, this woman is going to make you ill. Again, she's not a feminist. She's an agent, she's an activist for globalism. All Swedish radio, all Swedish media, with very few exceptions, is utterly controlled by the government. So whatever she says, you can be sure it's government position, and it's the government that put her up to it. Right? She is following orders. But the hypocrisy, the ugly hypocrisy with which she does it, is kind of just, it's pretty surprising.
Normalt och vanligt sätt att säga, men vad händer egentligen? Jag kopplar inte samman det med att det är några speciella sanningsanspråk. Jag kan säga det om ganska mycket. Vi säger inte att något är fel eller rätt.
Ni säger inte att något är fel eller rätt?
Nej, vi säger inte att något är fel eller rätt.
The journalist asked her the obvious question, the real journalist. Your job isn't to find the truth? Isn't to realize what's correct and what isn't? That's not your job? And for a moment she's like, oh shit, what did I just step in? But she came right back. Because in fact, her hypocrisy is so profound that it didn't even really faze her. I mean, you could tell her that there was that moment of doubt where she said, oh, okay, I got to pivot on this one. She is saying, well, you're going to hear it right now. This is the line that really gets me.
Är inte det ert jobb att ta fram saker som är rätt att säga?
Jag menar att vi inte sätter oss till doms över någon. Vi sätter oss inte till doms över någon.
Look at that. She doesn't judge anybody. He asked her, isn't it your job to find out what is correct, what is incorrect? Isn't it your job to tell the truth? But we don't judge. Like, what does that have to do with it? In other words, she wasn't judging that the people in Amun's community were actually doing what she said they were doing. And even if they were, she doesn't judge. In other words, what Amun was saying was that they were recruiting jihadists in the mosque, and they were doing it right there in Sweden. She also did a lot of reports on the treatment of women, Somali women, in Sweden. And this is what this hypocrite has to say. Oh, but we don't judge. And who's to know if it's true or not? right? This is postmodernism, social deconstructionism, constructionism at its best, but it's really not even that. She's just a puppet for the regime, but she's cunning and she's vicious because she knows she's the one that leaked the lady's name out to the public. She's the one that betrayed this Somali would-be journalist. It's unbelievable, isn't it?
Amun säger att konflikt ledde till att hon blev mer utfryst och de religiösa grupperna fick ett kvitto på att de hade rätt. Hon fick fler hot, bland annat ett paket med en lemlästad docka. Och hennes egen familj vände sig mot henne.
Men familjen har sagt det till mig. Ser du nu vad svenska journalisterna gör? Varför? Du rapporterar.
You see what she's saying? Her family knows the racket. She was too innocent. Her family knew that the Swedish government didn't care about Muslim jihadists, not in the least. But even if they didn't care, why did they have to throw her under the bus like that? But her family knew. You see, that's why so many of the immigrants are there with very cynical attitudes. They come there for the welfare, and they know the racket. They know the scam. As you're going to see, she says it in the end. They do it for the votes, because that's what they're there for.
När Sven inte vill rapportera.
Amun Abdullahi säger att hon till slut flyttade från Rinkeby på grund av alla hot. Sen konflikt sändes har hon mest varit sjukskriven eller tjänstledig. Och hon ska nu definitivt lämna journalistiken för gott, säger hon.
Ja, du kan inte förstå kanske eftersom du tillhör den här journalisterna, svenska journalisterna som kan sitta och diskutera sig. Det här kan...
You see what she's saying? She's incriminating him. These Swedish and Norwegian journalists, the guy's actually Norwegian, they talk about it, they debate, but they don't have the guts to do anything. And of course, they don't, but also the government makes sure that they don't. I mean, you see what they did to her. Do you think they wouldn't do it to a Swedish journalist? Of course they would.
Vi inte ta. Det här är känsla. Om vi tar den, Sverigedemokraterna får rösten, då tillhör de här gruppen.
You see, they know the racket. They know it. They bring the immigrants in because they vote for the party. The Swedish Democrats are a party that, by the way, I met one of their leaders when I was with my good friend Semiagog. We did a conference in Stockholm. And they were just rising back then. Now, things are really changing in Sweden, hopefully. We don't know that they're actually changing, but the political parties are changing.
Det senaste halvåret har hon varit i Mogadishu och drivit en flickskola. Hon är bara i Sverige tillfälligt. Nu vill hon säga upp sig och flytta till Somalia för gott, säger hon. Men Mogadishu är ett farligt ställe.
Här är också farligt. Här är farligare än Mogadishu.
Hur menar du då?
Det där kan man inte säga sanningen, när man döljer sanningen, när man tystar människor.
You can't say the truth in Sweden. She's talking about in Sweden.
Sanna, säger Amun. Hon kom som flykting till Sverige. Nu är hon på flykt igen. På väg till Somalia för att börja om.
Om du brinner någonting och du förlorar, det är ingen problem. Men om du tror någonting och du förlorar, det är ont. Jag trodde på journalism. Och jag trodde, trots allt, ibland jag ser fel. Men jag trodde om Sveriges Radio också. Och jag trodde på mig själv. Väldigt mycket. Och de alla tre krossade samtidigt.
Now you see what I mean when I'm talking about feminism. It's not about women. It hasn't been about women since the 1960s and 70s. It is global socialism using feminism as a tool. And this is a perfect example. The truth is kept silent, the truth is kept in secret, and the people are kept silent. We're seeing this emerging right here in the United States. And again, feminism, as I've showed in my past videos, has done nothing for women since the 70s, while they obsess over this absurd fetish with abortion. At any rate, I think you'll agree this is a pretty sad story, right? She was completely betrayed. All right, this section here is more a prelude to the immigration that we're going to talk about in the next video. However, this incident takes place in Rinkeby, which is the same district, same neighborhood where the lady from Mogadishu that we just saw the interview of, she comes from here. So in case you have any doubts that what she was saying was the truth, this should put that to rest. And again, to think that the authorities don't know that what she's saying is the truth, of course they do. And of course that lady knew. And of course, the only way this could happen, what you're going to witness right here, is because the government facilitated it. There's no way this could have happened any other way.
The country's image was shattered 3 years ago when riots broke out in the Stockholm suburb of Husby. There are now 55 declared no-go zones in Sweden where police have to escort ambulances to ensure their safety. And as we found out, the temperature is similar in the suburb of Rinkeby, home to mostly Somali migrants. Within minutes of us arriving, a group of young men make it clear we're not wanted and deliberately run down our cameraman.
Whoops! Nej men vad fan!
Hey, 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 hey.
Gå on! Shit! What happened?
You all right?
Your leg?
It's a little more hostile than I had anticipated.
Okay, welcome to Rinkeby. It's also called Little Mogadishu.
And is that what you're worried about for the future of Sweden? That clash, this clash
Yes,
we
of
saw?
course. Now, one of your film crew members was run over by a car here, and it took us 1.5 minutes. So
Yes, we're literally just out of the car and aggression.
they didn't have any reason to do that, did they?
No, well, definitely not.
We call the police.
To be honest, we hadn't anticipated such intense aggression.
Now this is going to really amaze you. Our police are still at least policemen. What you're going to witness these police people do is, well, it's as bad in England. They're just as bad. This is pitiful.
Our cameraman was
And even they fear their presence will be provocative.
I think it's better if you go in without us, because I think it would be...
very aggressive.
Yeah, if
Okay,
we're young.
that's
So we will stay here, and if it is...
That's fine.
You watch us.
Perfect.
Thank you. Okay, thank you.
Now imagine that. These policemen are not going to go, they are the policemen of the city in Sweden. I forget what city Rinkeby is in. These are Swedish police in Sweden, in their own city, and they don't have the balls to go in? What is this, occupied territory? Well, of course, that is what it is. It's occupied territory. However, let's keep in mind, true, the policemen probably are a bunch of pussies, but they're also told not to do it. They're told not to, how should we put it, rile up the natives or whatever. They're told not to go in and cause any trouble. Who tells them this? The authorities. Who else?
Majority here are Muslims from East Africa, and they don't assimilate well into the Swedish culture and society, and they're unemployed, and they're poor. So you add all these factors together, and their youth are feeling marginalized and don't speak Swedish very well, so they don't get jobs or get into the Swedish youth culture either.
Now the guy's off the deep end there, because that's not true. This has already been shown since this is about 15 years old now. Not quite. They don't want jobs. They didn't come to Sweden to work, everybody. They came to Sweden specifically for the benefits. And they knew that ahead of time. You've all seen the, hopefully you followed this at least to the degree that the law is when you get into the Schengen territory, that's the free migration area in Europe, that you go to the nearest country of asylum. But they don't do that. They go through those countries and they say, no, we want Germany or Sweden. Why? Because the benefits are so good. They have no intentions of working. They didn't come there to work. They didn't come there to be part of the Swedish culture, of the Swedish civilization. That's obvious. The question is, the authorities know this, even if that poor soul doesn't. The authorities know this, so they're doing it deliberately. For what? To disintegrate the identity and the culture of the Swedish people, as they're doing all over Europe.
But not everyone is hostile.
Oh, okay. Yeah, my cousin lives in Melbourne.
Many locals are polite and friendly and happy to talk.
It's good.
Yeah.
I'm very happy.
But what happened next changed everything. The police leave, and as we prepare to go, young men masking their faces arrive.
Now, the police never went in. They stayed on the outskirts. And then they left. They didn't know what was going to happen. You see, something is very sinister here. There's no way the police didn't know what was going to happen. This is their beat. Of course they know.
You're doing good. You're doing good? Yeah. Okay, very good.
Take it easy.
Okay, you too.
And attack.
Go!
Mate! Go!
Don't you touch me!
Okay, we're gonna drink.
Excuse me. Please.
Get out of here.
No, we are leaving, but you don't need to hurt us. There's no need to be unkind.
There's no need to be unkind, she says. Jesus Christ.
Hey,
Can't film. Don't do it.
The gang's attention turns when a local intervenes and drives his mobility scooter into the most violent attacker.
Move. We've been individually attacked. Salman has been...
Now notice, that Somali in the wheelchair stuck his neck out for them and attacked the most aggressive of those little bastards. And what did they do? They left. They didn't even go to see if he was all right. They didn't go to help him. You know, the weak and the pitiful get what they deserve.
Punched, the producer's been punched, you've been run over, the cameraman. We've all been assaulted and insulted. It's best we leave.
Yeah, along with the police, right? If you've never seen this clip before, we're not surprised. We've been watching things like this happen for a long time. And this is just one of many. Okay, so again, this is not about Islam one way or the other. This is about immigration, and this is about betrayal. So here we see in the headline, 3 men convicted in Swedish rape live streamed on Facebook. It turns out they're all 3 Afghans. 2 of them were recent immigrants, and one was born in Sweden by 2 Afghan parents. So the point is what? What they're showing here is utter contempt. No people go as immigrants, as asylum seekers, to another people's country and do this kind of thing. I'm sorry to tell you that this is not rare. It happens a lot. In fact, that's why there's been a sudden change in the government in Sweden. And again, we're just hoping there was a change. But this is the sort of thing that went on. And you can see that already in what I've been showing you. It is pure contempt for the Swedish people. But it's not just the so-called immigrants. It's the government. What kind of people would do this to their own country, to their own people, and why? That's really where I'm going with this. Imagine that. They were raping her, laughing about it, and live streamed it on Facebook. There's been some really gruesome murders also done that way against Swedish women. It's almost always against Swedish women, although a few young Swedish boys were beaten, robbed, raped, and actually urinated on. And they put it onto the Swedish Facebook. They laughed about it. Again, people, we're talking about utter contempt. But why do they get away with it? They know they'll get away with it. No one's going to come and kill them, which is really kind of astounding. But who has more contempt for them? These people who are at least from another culture, another land, another ethnicity? No, it's from their own government. And we will see that more and more when we go into the next video. It's deliberate and it's systematic. Systemic, as they say. Now, by the way, I want to make something very clear. This is not about Islam per se, but it's definitely not about people from the Middle East. It's definitely not about people even who are Muslims. I've met a number of Afghanis in the flamenco community. When I was in Santa Fe, I dated a woman who was from Afghanistan. And these are wonderful people. Now, they're very tough, a little wild, and you don't want to mess with them, in case you didn't realize that already. But they're just some wonderful people. Again, I've met Iranians. I dated a Moroccan girl. I'm not trying to brag. I'm just saying that you can't judge a people by either the government, of course we don't want that, or sometimes by their religion or the fanatics of their religion or just where the religion went over time. I mean, this is another discussion. The pros and cons of Islam is another discussion. But there are plenty of Muslim people who are wonderful, and they're here in the United States. So keep that in mind. What I'm talking about is betrayal, the real betrayal. And that's not what they're doing. Say what you want, the Muslims are not betraying us. No, the globalists are. The government of Sweden was betraying their own people in a horrible way. And really, something is happening here very similar. Okay, so we don't want to obsess over Sweden, so let's take a look at Germany, because it's related. In fact, they're going to talk about the Cologne incident. And when this was filmed, they didn't realize that actually it didn't just happen in Cologne. It was coordinated throughout Germany and even parts of Sweden, Denmark, I believe, and the Netherlands. So this was completely coordinated. So take it away.
1 year after another crime that inflamed tensions between Germans and the growing population of refugees there. The mass sexual assault of 1,200 women on New Year's Eve by as many as 2,000 men. The attack had huge political consequences over the year that followed, but as Malene Larsen found out, very few legal ones.
Now, of course, that's worth noting, isn't it? Very few legal ones. In other words, the authorities didn't seem to have done much about it. And of course, this liberal, feminist Germany, right?
Ja, und seit Silvester trage ich halt dieses Messer immer mit mir rum, um mich sicherer zu fühlen. Ja.
Good for you, lady. And by the way, women in Germany were ostracized when people found out that they were carrying weapons, and I think pepper spray was outlawed. So this girl probably got a lot of heat from social media. God forbid the women should defend themselves. The men sure aren't doing anything, right?
Vanessa is one of the 1,200 women across Germany who were sexually assaulted or harassed last New Year's Eve. She took us back to the main train station in Cologne, where it happened.
Als ich hier angekommen bin, war es ungefähr 12:30. Halt mitten in der Menge oder habe versucht, noch weiter reinzugehen. Und von hinten hat mir halt jemand richtig in den Po reingefasst. Andere haben dann halt an die Brust gefasst und vorne, unten halt, also in den Intimbereich haben die versucht zu fassen. Und ich habe mich einfach nur, ich weiß nicht, minderwertig gefühlt, wie so ein Stück Dreck, was einfach an die Straße geworfen wird.
And just as an aside, a similar incident happened in Sweden at a concert. And the same thing, girls were surrounded by groups of people from North Africa. In the Sweden case, it was more, I think, Afghans. You're going to find out here it was mostly Tunisians, Moroccans, mostly from North Africa. At any rate, the point being, it was very similar. The girls were fondled. One of them was raped right there in the concert. A lot of people threw a fit. They became furious. But again, the legal ramifications were virtually zero. And what was the feminist solution to this? They thought that what they should do is have all women all-women concerts. The problem was men, not the immigrants, but men. Well, the problem was the government, and we'll get to that.
The guys who were groping you, can you describe what they looked like? Ja, es waren halt Typen auf jeden Fall aus dem Ausland, so arabisch, marokkanisch. Was the police not doing anything? Die standen nur da, auch als dieses Mädchen laut geschrien hat, hat einfach nur geguckt und nichts getan. Die waren so damit beschäftigt, weil so viele versucht haben, da hoch oder sich da durchzudrängen.
What did we just see in Sweden? What's wrong with the men in Europe? Are they really that much of a bunch of pussies? I don't think so. But the police are. They hire them precisely because they're pussies or because they will do as they're told. And they know that you don't go after foreigners. They know that you don't arrest and go after anybody who's an immigrant. They know not to. Maybe they're threatened they'll lose their jobs. So what's the stupid thing that they mumble? They mumble something about Islamophobia and about not wanting to cause a hostile environment for the immigrants or stereotypes or some other bullshit.
Arnold Plickert is the head of the Police Officers Union.
Also es waren keine Erkenntnisse da, dass es am Silvesterabend hier in Köln zu so einer großen Menschenansammlung kommt. Demzufolge waren wir hier nach Lageeinschätzung mit 150 Polizistinnen und Polizisten.
It took the police until 4 a.m. to finally get control of the situation. At 8:57 a.m. on New Year's Day, the police sent out a press release saying the night had been relaxed.
Ja, das ist ein grober Fehler gewesen.
No. That wasn't a big mistake, you weasel. You were instructed to do that because that's the policy. You don't want to get any anti-immigration sentiment because you intend to bring more in, which is exactly what they continued to do.
Die Leiterin ist nicht mehr da.
What did it take 4 days for the police to come out in public with what had actually happened? Was there a cover-up?
Das war aber nicht der Fall. Aber man muss natürlich dann in Ruhe und sauber ermitteln, bevor ich dann in die Öffentlichkeit gehe und vielleicht keine richtigen Fakten habe.
Did you listen to that weasel? And the Swedish, I don't know that in a Swedish situation, there was the same question posed about whether or not there was a cover-up. Well, it's a PR man in the department. What is he going to say? Of course there wasn't a cover-up. They were just being thorough.
January 9th, anti-immigrant groups had taken to the streets in protest.
Believe me, if these had been white nationalists, there would have been no cover-up. It would have been all over the news immediately.
The attacks to the open-door refugee policy of German Chancellor Angela Merkel. In the months after the incidents, anti-refugee sentiment grew. Most of the identified attackers were men of North African origin. Fahed Nael came to Germany from Tunisia 10 years ago. Now he volunteers, welcoming new refugees and migrants to Cologne at the train station.
Il n'y a plus de confiance pour la tête avec les cheveux noirs après tout ce que la média a dit sur les Nord-Africains.
Oh, because of what the media's been saying about the poor North Africans. Listen to this weasel. See, they know the racket. They know the racket. They know what to say.
Il y a eu beaucoup d'attaques sexuelles cette soirée-là. Est-ce que ça a quelque chose à voir avec une vue de femme qui est différente ou pourquoi tu crois que quelque chose comme ça se passe?
Ce sont des gens malades qui ont fait ça. Ça n'a rien à voir avec la nation ou bien la culture. Parce que si quelqu'un il respecte sa mère et sa sœur, il va pas respecter quelqu'un. On essaie de faire du bien et c'est pas bien de nous mettre tous dans la même casserole.
You see how sly that guy was? Oh, please. They respect their mother. They respect their sister. That doesn't mean they respect yours, especially non-believers. And believe me, they have a word. I think it's something like pig or something that they call. In Sweden, there's a word for it, and in Germany too. And they use it all the time, casually. There's a totally different attitude towards their women, their mothers, their sisters, than there is against the non-Islamic, non-Middle Eastern women. And of course, part of it is because they see our women as acting like a bunch of sluts. And, well.
A year later in Cologne, only 2 people have been convicted of sexual assault and 1 for sexual harassment.
Only 3 people have actually been convicted. Why is that?
Das hängt damit zusammen, dass die Polizei relativ wenig Personalien festgestellt hat in der Tatnacht, sodass wir eben im Nachhinein darauf angewiesen waren, Telefondaten auszuwerten, Videomaterial auszuwerten, über 1000.
Oh, I'm not even going to listen to this weasel. I mean, you can just look at him. What a weasel. He's towing the line. See, this is what I mean by they're hiring police and they're hiring people and putting them into positions that they know are spineless, gutless little weasels. Consider for a moment what happened here in the United States January 6th. With the kind of surveillance equipment that they have, they rounded up people from all over the United States from January 6th who just happened to be there. They didn't even do anything. They didn't even walk into the Capitol. They found them, they tracked them down, they arrested them, and they put them in jail. How many? Hundreds. And you're telling me that these pitiful creatures couldn't find but 3? Oh, really?
What do you think have been the wider effects of the events on New Year's Eve?
In meiner persönlichen Meinung hat es natürlich immense Auswirkungen gehabt auf die Frage, wie man mit Flüchtlingen umgeht, wie man auf Flüchtlinge schaut.
So what? Is he concerned with how they're viewed? Like, that's the problem? So we're not going to go into any more into this. A lot of you know what happened at Cologne. Those of you that don't, again, this happened. And it was actually far more widespread across Europe, and it was coordinated. They know that from the cell phone conversations. So again, they tracked these cell phone conversations, so they could have tracked many more. They could have arrested many people, and they did not. So again, let's ask. The question is, why do the immigrants do this? It's very simple, people, because they can. They do it because they can. They do it because somebody is allowing them to. Somebody is facilitating it. This is the great betrayal. This is the treachery that we're looking at. Don't blame the immigrants. Of course, they come from different cultures, blah, 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 and all the rest. Yes, they have contempt for women, especially women that are out at night drinking. We know all that. But why are they doing it? Because they can. That's why. And they know they can. And then you have to ask the question, who is facilitating this? Who is making this possible? If these were white nationalists that did the same thing, they would have come down on them so hard, just as they did here on January 6th. Who is suffering from this the most? The women. Who are indoctrinated in the colleges to go down to the train stations when the refugees are coming in the bus stations. Refugees are welcome. Don't give in to hate. Please, people, there's something rotten here. And that's my point. I'm not here to talk about Islam or anything else. I'm here to talk about treachery, betrayal, and that the feminist movement has been betrayed, but that is simply a symptom of a much larger betrayal. Now we're going to bring this discussion, this video, around to full circle. Ayaan Hirsi Ali. From where? Mogadishu. Remember little Mogadishu in Rinkeby, Sweden? The lady from Mogadishu? Ayaan Hirsi is from Mogadishu. She lives in the United States now. She's also a dual citizenship, United States and Dutch. And you will see why, because, well, I'll tell you why, because she used to be a member of the Dutch Parliament. But there's so much to her. She has to be one of the boldest, bravest, preeminent feminists of our time. And I have personal experience of being attacked on Facebook, of people attacking her. I got into some discussion about Islam and the so-called, again, they're globalists masquerading as feminists. So we're going to see how she's been treated by the globalists masquerading as feminists. And we're also going to see just how brave and how accomplished she actually is. She's very impressive. And one thing I have to say about doing this whole Useless Eaters series, which involves a lot of the history of feminism, is the amount of bold, audacious ladies that you come across. And most of them are not in the canon of what people look to as famous feminists. So with that brief little introduction, we're going to now move on to an interview with Jordan Peterson. Okay, we're going to show a short clip of this interview with Jordan Peterson, a fellow I like a lot, you may not. Nonetheless, the purpose of this short portion of this clip is actually a pretty extended interview, but I just want to get the very beginning so you get an idea of her background and her credentials. So here we go. This is Jordan Peterson, and he is, I hate it when that happens. He is interviewing Ayaan Hirsi Ali.
I have the great privilege today of talking with Ayaan Hirsi Ali. She's one of my heroes. I guess that's the case ever since I read her book, Infidel, which I believe was published in 2006. She's also published Nomad and Heretic and a new book, which we're going to talk about today, a daring book, I would say, which is in keeping with her general courage, all things considered. Pray, the name of the book. Immigration, Islam, and the Erosion of Women's Rights.
Now you can see how this is in keeping. This book is very much in keeping with where I'm going with this series. So you can see one of the many reasons I picked her. She's obviously one of the most accomplished and preeminent feminists of our era. And you're going to see how she has been treated. And of course, you're starting to get the gist. You know why. Or it should be dawning on you why.
All topics that I don't believe you can discuss without bringing a tremendous amount of negative attention to yourself, but which in principle still need to be discussed. You've had an amazing life, Ayaan. I don't know if it's a life anyone would choose for themselves necessarily. Maybe just for our viewers who aren't familiar with us, if you could present a bit of biographical information about yourself, that would be a good backdrop to the investigation into your book that we're going to conduct today. And welcome to this discussion. I'm very pleased to see you.
Jordan, thank you very, very much for having me. And yes, the feeling is mutual. You are also one of my personal heroes, and I thank you for your courage. I was born in Somalia, and I grew up all over the place. My family left Somalia when I was about 7 or 8 years old, and then we lived in Saudi Arabia, in Ethiopia. I was in Kenya with my family for about 10 or 11 years, and most of that time my father was absent.
Okay, so I'm going to leave it there for now. Besides that, she's written 4 books. She's from Somalia, Mogadishu, which is what brings this entire video around full circle. She goes on to talk about how she lives under death threats and she has security around her all the time. And why is that? Well, she was involved with a person named, I don't mean romantically, but she did worked on a movie called Fitna by Theo van Gogh, who was a grandson or great-grandson of the famous Vincent van Gogh. And Theo was subsequently murdered in broad daylight in the streets. He was stabbed a bunch of times, shot, stabbed, and his throat slit. And a message written on his, wasn't written on his forehead, but a paper was kind of stuck on his forehead, in which he implicated other people that were also in danger that he would like to kill, and she was one of them. Now, also we can add to her 4 books and a whole lot more, as you're going to see. She was also a member of the Dutch Parliament. So this is an eminently qualified woman. Should be an icon for all feminists, right? Right.
Neatly in Islam, that is not just violent but also leans against women. You have traveled the full journey from declaring yourself an atheist at one point to being willing more recently to engage with the reformists within Islam. But you have stuck to your position that there is a problem in the faith. And I would put to you that there are so many misogynists and they belong to so many different religions. Why are you picking only on Islam?
Now I have to say right away, this is the kind of thing that she's up against because This lady is, I would say, disingenuous. She can't be serious, right? She has an agenda, and this is what Ayan and many feminist liberals are up against, these globalists masquerading as feminists, because this is a panel about feminism and Islam, and I'll leave the link below so you can, if you want to see the whole thing. To compare Christianity with Islam in regards to women, and again, I'm not here to criticize one way Islam. It has some good things to it. I can't think of one right now, but it does. Well, actually, it does have some good things. It promotes masculinity and strong, virile men. That is very good. But when you're asking about the role of women, there's no comparison. And there's been no comparison between the role of women in Islamic culture as opposed to other cultures. You see, what she's doing is she's putting everything into one basket by saying, oh, there's misogynists everywhere. That's not the point. It's the degree. The degree is what makes the distinction. Yes, there are misogynists everywhere. What she really means is that the entire planet, all humanity is patriarchal. The idea that there ever was a matriarch is stupid. It's like saying that bovines once had relationships, the relationship between bulls and cows was somehow different, 100,000 years ago, and now suddenly they've transformed. Now we as a species that is more self-conscious, and I ascribe that completely to religion, we should be called, as Mircea Eliade said, homo religiosus. We have reached a state of consciousness that we can rearrange and reconstruct the social contract. That's true. And when you see that, you'll see that many cultures have reconstructed the social contract between males and females differently. Not very different, but all of them started from the position of a fundamental patriarchy. And that's really what she says by misogynist. What she really means is patriarchal. But when you look at the distinctions, that's what's important. And the history of Christianity and the history of Islam, when it comes to the role of women, could not be more different. In fact, medieval males have often made fun of Christian males for that very reason. Even back in the Roman days, they would say, there was a saying among the Persians that these crazy Romans, they could rule the world, but they couldn't rule their own women. Well, that's because we had a much more freer relationship between male and female. It was also true of the Scandinavians. Regardless of how you feel about that, there's no way that these so-called intellectuals that are having this discussion don't know this, but they pretend they don't.
Thank you. Any public relations person will tell you never open your remarks with statistics. And I'm famous for being disobedient. And so I'm going to do just that. And I'm going to take from a Pew Research, and Pew does this research on religion, and particularly in the Islamic world, year after year. In 2013, they had the following question. They have this question all the time, but here goes. Do you favor or oppose making Sharia law or Islamic law the official law of the land in our country? 72% of Indonesians, 99% of Afghanis, 82% of Bangladeshis, 84% of Pakistanis, 74% of Egyptians, and on and on and on it goes, these overwhelming majorities of Muslims who favor Islamic law.
Now keep in mind, this includes the women. Remember, when we see a woman in a burqa, we believe she is dying to be set free. I guarantee you, many of them, if you were to go to their country to do that, they'll hide Kalashnikovs, AK-47s under their burqas, and when you try to set them free, they'll blow you away. So we have to be very careful about how we approach other cultures. In fact, my opinion, we should just leave them alone. What we are trying to do is protect Western civilization. What the crazy neocons and the fascist liberals are trying to do is another story.
My position is, and has always been, let's make a distinction between Islam as a doctrine and Muslims as fellow human beings who are incredibly diverse. I embrace Muslims, but I reject Islamic law. I reject Islamic law because it's totalitarian. I reject Islamic law because it's bigoted, and especially bigoted against women.
Now, I have to bring to your attention, there have been books written, and I kind of lost track of them because I came across them years ago, that particularly describe the similarities between socialist, they didn't call it political correctness because actually these books were published before then, but between socialism and Sharia. I've talked about this before, that in socialism, every thought, word, and deed is political. Therefore, it's the duty of the state to regulate that which is political. Therefore, it is the duty of the state, it is a requirement that the state regulate every thought, word, and deed. Well, Sharia law is very similar. Every minute detail of your life is to be regulated because every thought, word, and deed is religious. Anyways, I thought I would just share that with you.
Where Islamic law becomes the law of the land, if these attitudes are translated into law, women will need a male guardian. Child marriage is reintroduced. You'll be disinherited. If you're raped, it's your fault and you get stoned to death. And we see numerous examples of that today. I reject Islamic law because it's inherently hostile to women.
Now, you see, she's saying the obvious. They go on to argue with her and stuff, but she actually defends herself very well, and she puts them in their place. It is obviously more hostile to women than any religion or any culture in the world. It's obviously true. Now, to some people, that's a good thing. And I'm not going to argue that because that's not the point here. The point is that for saying this, this feminist has been ostracized by who? By the feminists. That is what is so strange. And meanwhile, undercover, we are having Sharia laws implemented in many places in Europe, not just in the no-go territories, the no-go zones, but also there have been attempts to install Sharia law into the law of the land already when they're only such a small percentage of the population. So anyways.
Is committed to fighting jihad, you'll find him. I don't think that that is the greatest dilemma for liberal societies. I'll tell you what the greatest dilemma is for liberal societies. It is this idea of moral relativism, multiculturalism, political correctness. It is the idea of a liberal society and the reality of a liberal society and liberal societies committing suicide.
Is it amazing that she can see this? But she's not the only one. People who come from Muslim countries see it, and from, in my case, my Cuban family. I have a cousin, Armando, who passed away recently, but he came over much later than the rest of the family. And he just looked around, and I think I've said this before. He one day on the phone said to my mother, Elcita, where am I going to go now? They see it. People from Eastern European countries, people from former communist countries, they see it. It's cultural suicide. Why don't the feminists want to listen to her? Well, because they're not feminists. They're globalists masquerading as feminists.
The self-inhibition that to discuss Islam as an idea, the way we discuss Christianity as an idea, or socialism as an idea, or nationalism as an idea, or national socialism as an idea, or liberalism as an idea, that if we apply that level of scrutiny to Islam, we are guilty of racism. That is, I think, the inherent weakness in our liberal societies. And the Medina Muslims see that and exploit it. If you are sensitive to white guilt, and I'm a Medina Muslim with a mission, why would I not exploit that?
Do you see how brilliant that is? But on the other hand, how obvious it is. They see the racket for what it is. And they come to Europe knowing that this racket is well in place and waiting for them. Asylum seekers? Really?
It is the departure from what liberal societies were made of, which was to protect the rights of individuals, the rights and freedoms of individuals, and at the same time, nurture those individuals in their own obligations, that choices have consequences, and that individuals are responsible.
Can you find a better American than this? Really Westerner, but particularly, I think, American to some degree. What she has just said, and she's not Republican, Democrat, or anything, she's simply a humanist in the true sense of the Western tradition, the role of the individual. But she goes on, she really is insightful.
Instead, we've moved to collectives, ethnic groups, women, the poor. And the left, and especially the far left, are very good and very self-righteous at telling us all about groups, but they are very, very poor at telling us about what happens to the individuals inside those groups. And the Medina Muslims exploit that. You can't blame the Medina Muslims for exploiting that. You can blame the left for letting them do it.
Wow. I mean, could you say it any more clearly? Our enemy is not Islam, really. It never has, well, Western civilization and Islam have been at it for centuries. But in this particular instance, the real enemy is not, or are not, the Muslims. It's our own government. It's the globalist, Marxist, socialist, fascists. They're the ones enabling Islam to do what it's doing to us from within. All right, considering what you've just seen and heard, let's take a look at this excerpt from an article written about Ayaan Hirsi Ali. A university has reversed a decision to grant an honorary degree to an advocate for Muslim women who has made comments critical of Islam. I mean, right there, that first sentence doesn't even make any sense, right? Brandeis University said in a statement that Somali-born Ayaan Hirsi Ali would no longer receive the honorary degree which had planned to award her at the May 18th commencement. Ali, a member of the Dutch Parliament from 2003 to 2006, has been quoted as making comments critical of Islam. That includes a 2007 interview with Reason magazine in which she said of the religion, quote, "Once it's defeated, it can mutate into something peaceful. It's very difficult to even talk about peace now. They're not interested in peace. I think that we are at war with Islam and there's no middle ground in wars," unquote. Let's revisit Brandeis University. If you look over here, it's a Jewish university, right? Our Jewish roots. Brandeis University was founded in 1948 by the American Jewish community at a time when Jews and other ethnic and racial minorities and women faced discrimination in higher education. So it seems like she'd be a perfect fit for that, wouldn't she? You would think. Well, let's take a look at the mission and diversity statement, because that's always of interest, isn't it? Aims to engage members of our community as active citizens in a multicultural world. Now, does Ayaan Hirsi not fit that? I would think she did. Seeks to build an academic community whose members have diverse cultures, backgrounds, and life experiences. Well, would she fit that? You would think so. Recognizes the need to analyze and address the ways in which social, cultural, and economic inequalities affect power and privilege in the large society and at Brandeis itself. Now you can smell the globalists at work, right? But she is African. She is black. So she really can't fall into the category of power and privilege, because when you ask the question of how does an object or an event or whatever resist or abet social inequalities at the hands of the dominant culture, as perpetuated by the dominant culture, she obviously does not pertain to or is a member of the dominant culture. But she is not accusing the dominant culture, which of course we know the dominant culture is interpreted now as whiteness. It used to be Western civilization, Christianity, and capitalism, but it's been subsumed. It's been subsumed under whiteness. Okay, well, she's not white. But this is where we get into the black face of white supremacy, right? She's not towing the party line. So here's really where things start to get, you can kind of see where this is going. Because superficially, she should fit in perfectly. Endeavors to foster a just and inclusive campus culture that embraces diversity of the larger society. Well, she certainly is diverse, isn't she? So here's where this is their official response. Ali, a member of the Dutch Parliament from 2003 to 2006, as we pointed out, has been quoted as making comments critical of Islam. Okay, you can't? That includes a 2007 interview with Reason magazine in which she said of the religion, once it's defeated, it can mutate into something peaceful. It's very difficult to even talk about peace now. They're not interested in peace. I think that we are at war with Islam and there's no middle ground in wars. Now, you saw what happened to people after 9/11 that said anything like this. I mean, they were just excoriated. Yet here's a Muslim saying exactly that. It doesn't matter for us to say we're not at war with Islam because Islam is at war with us. Those of you who know much about Islam, you know there's Islam divides the world into Dar Islam and Dar Hagar, which is the house of submission and the house of war. So again, we're not here to really talk about or analyze Islam one way or the other. The point is, her opinion as a black Muslim African cannot be tolerated. This is a Jewish university. And they said they bowed to, well, they didn't say they bowed to pressure. Of course, they didn't put it that way. They said after things were brought to their attention, blah, 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 well, you have to ask, by who? Well, yeah, that's a good question, isn't it? By who? But they didn't have to go along with it. They did nonetheless. And you can see why when we go back to here, right there. The need to analyze and address the ways in which social, cultural, and economic inequalities affect power and privilege in the large society and at Brandeis itself. Here's where they got her. She's not towing the party line. Power and privilege is something they define. So, Ayaan Hirsi Ali is a black person, an accomplished woman, a Muslim, an immigrant. But she criticized something other than Christianity, capitalism, Western civilization, or, to put it more succinctly, whiteness. In fact, she specifically criticized mass Islamic immigration, and she defended European liberal values. Read whiteness. An accomplished black, female, educated Muslim immigrant could not be allowed to do this. She was not allowed to defend European values or whiteness or oppose mass Islamic immigration into Europe. Oppose the oppressed. Even a Jewish university could not allow this. Or is that a surprise? Here is the magic question. How does, fill in the blank, Ayaan Hirsi Ali resist or abet social inequalities perpetuated by the dominant culture? Whiteness. She is anti-Islamic immigration. That's the oppressed. And she is pro-European liberal values. Read whiteness. Therefore, she is a racist, Islamophobe, etc., 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 ad nauseum. She is a white supremacist. You see how that works? So now we're going to get to the conclusions. And of course, I need to do that because my cigar is about out. It's my second one, and I'm trying to cut back. So let's look at the conclusions, and then we're going to wrap this up. So again, this video is not about Islam. It's about how all liberal women are being thrown under the bus by the globalists. Global socialists masquerading as feminists. The new gender hysteria is now putting the final nail in the feminist coffin. And all the so-called feminists can do is scream about their abortion fetish. I mean, isn't it? It's getting just so redundant and insane, isn't it? But are the women of the West finally waking up to how they've been misled? Now, some people are saying that with the new, the polls coming out, that could be possible for this, the midterm elections. I don't know. I don't have too much faith in that. I hope so. But who are the globalists? And what are their real objectives? Who are the new useless eaters of the 21st century? That's a question. We know the objectives of the 19th and 20th century eugenicists. They were open and upfront about it. A better, healthier, European, yes, white race. All right, they made no bones about it. They said it very clearly. They weren't necessarily against other races. I mean, look at Victoria Woodhull. She was not at all. She ran with a black man for presidency and Frederick Douglass for vice president. So it wasn't a question about necessarily just a better European white race. In some cases, it was a better human race. Nonetheless, that was their objectives, and for many of them, they were focused on their own people, the white European people. Yes, those were the early eugenicists. So who were the useless eaters? Okay, they were pretty obvious about that too. The infirmed, the genetically deficient, the mentally retarded, etc., etc. Okay, for all their faults. But that was the first eugenicists. But now, in the 21st century, do today's eugenicists have the same objectives? Obviously not. Planned Parenthood and its founder, Margaret Sanger, were vehemently against abortion. Today's Planned Parenthood, in league with the universities, has created 3 generations of abortion hysterics. They are openly promoting the mutilation of healthy children, perfectly healthy children, and in the process creating infertile and sterile humans for life. Once the surgery is conducted, that's it. The new transgender hysteria has completely done away with any pretense that today's feminism, if it exists at all, has anything to do with making better lives for women. Surely no sane person can continue to believe that the Planned Parenthood and the abortion industry are about women's health. Is this the same Planned Parenthood that began 120 years ago? It has become obvious that what they are promoting is state parenthood and state eugenics. But the goals cannot possibly be the same. That's the real issue. The goals cannot possibly be the same. Is there a connection between the betrayal of the women's movement and the drive towards mass immigration into all of the Western nations? Is the betrayal of women part of a much broader betrayal? We'll be asking that question and more in discussion number 12, Weaponized Immigration and the New Useless Eaters, and that will be the completion of the Useless Eaters series. But I will leave you with this thought. Could it be that the new useless eaters of today are the strong, the brave, the creative, the productive? That's not ironic, that's perverse. But then again, when you look around, everything does look perverse, doesn't it? Hashtag abort Planned Parenthood. Hashtag defund the universities.